Just picture this for a second. It's 1944. You're wounded on a remote Pacific island and rescue is thousands of miles away. But what if a state-of-the-art hospital could actually come to you? Well, today we're going to explore the absolutely incredible story of World War II's floating sanctuaries. These were the ships that brought hope and healing right to the front lines. Okay, to really get into this, let's start with a really powerful quote from Lindsay Fitzharris's book, The Facemaker. Military technology had wildly surpassed its medical capabilities. Wow. Just think about that for a second. That one sentence just perfectly captures the horrifying problem of the time. We had become incredibly good at finding new ways to hurt people, but saving them? That was a whole different story.
So you've got soldiers wounded literally halfway around the world from any real medical help. And remember, air evacuation was still a pretty new idea. So the big question, the really urgent one, was how on earth do you save lives on a battlefield that spans the entire globe?
And the answer they came up with, it was as bold as it was absolutely essential. It was an entire fleet of ships dedicated to one thing: healing. This was the Mercy Fleet.
And that's not just a fancy name. These things were literally floating sanctuaries. You have to picture it. In the middle of all the chaos and destruction of war, you have these ships, painted bright white, these giant red crosses on them, and they carried 0 weapons. None. Their whole purpose was different.
And these ships weren't just random numbers, you know? They had names that meant something. The USS Comfort, the USS Hope, the USS Mercy. These names were a promise, right? They became these incredible beacons of safety in a world that was just tearing itself apart.
So what were they, officially? Well, hospital ships are non-combatant vessels. A lot of them were actually old passenger liners that got a total makeover into these full medical facilities. And under the Geneva Convention, they were protected. Their only mission was medical care. Now, the sad truth is, that protection wasn't always respected.
Yeah, and don't think of these as just some floating first aid station. No way. When you stepped on board, it was like stepping into a modern hospital. I'm talking operating rooms, x-ray suites, fully stocked pharmacies, and wards full of beds. For so many wounded service members, this was literally the first moment of safety they'd felt after just brutal combat. But you know, the story here is about more than just the ships themselves. They became these incredible floating labs for medical breakthroughs. This is where a whole new generation of doctors and nurses would pretty much change medicine as we know it.
To really get what happened in World War II, we actually have to rewind a bit, back to World War I. That's where you find pioneers like Surgeon Harold Gillies. He saw these horrific facial injuries from trench warfare and basically invented modern reconstructive surgery. His whole philosophy, that restoring a patient's dignity was just as important as fixing their physical wounds, that became a guiding principle for the caregivers of World War II. And the sheer scale of this whole operation, it's just staggering. By 1945, you had over 57,000 Army nurses deployed. And listen, they weren't sitting in some safe hospital back home. They were out there, on these ships, on evacuation transports, in field hospitals, right where the fighting was.
And the Navy's contribution? Just as vital. We're talking more than 14,000 Navy nurses serving during the war, and many of them were stationed right here, on these floating hospitals out in the Pacific, working around the clock in some of the most dangerous conditions you can imagine.
You know, all that pressure, that crucible of war, it forced medicine to advance at a crazy pace. And on these ships, you can really see 4 key things taking shape. First, they nailed down triage systems for dealing with tons of casualties at once. Second, they revolutionized shock treatment, using plasma and whole blood in ways that saved countless lives. Third, they figured out how to do complex surgery while literally floating on the ocean. And, maybe the biggest one of all, they perfected the kind of teamwork that is now the gold standard for trauma care.
And here's the thing that's so important to get. This isn't just a history lesson. The stuff they figured out on those ships, it's still with us. It has this incredible, enduring legacy that we all still rely on today. I mean, you can literally draw a straight line from what they were doing then to what we do now. The way they sorted casualties in a crisis, that's the basis for modern disaster response nursing. The teamwork they pioneered, we now call that collaborative trauma care. And the way they focused on the psychological toll of war, that was an early version of what we now call trauma-informed care.
And that legacy is very much alive and well. Today's big hospital ships, the USNS Comfort and the USNS Mercy, are the direct descendants of that fleet. They get deployed to humanitarian crises all over the world. The protocols they developed for triage under fire, still the foundation for how we handle mass casualty events. And that ethos, that mix of resilience and compassion that those nurses had, that still defines the profession to this day.
So in the end, yeah, they were ships. But they were so much more than that, weren't they? They were these powerful symbols of our commitment to healing, a reminder that even in the absolute darkest of times, our humanity, our compassion, it can still find a way to shine through. All right, before we wrap up, I just want to show you the sources we used for this explainer. So if you want to learn more and really go down the rabbit hole on this stuff, here are the sources on screen. There are some amazing histories, some deep dives on the angels of the Mercy Fleet, and of course, Lindsay Fitzharris's fantastic book, The Facemaker. And as a final note, AI was used for research, script, voice, editing, and fact-checking. All content has been verified and is original.